Good afternoon to our viewing audience. Happy Black History Month. Of course, I am happy to be with you again on Mondays at Beinecke. This is almost, I guess, like a second home. And I have the privilege today of being able to share with you an extension of a lot of the research that the Beinecke Community Engagement Department has been doing around the exhibit Shining Light on Truth, Black Lives at Yale and in New Haven. Today's presentation will focus, though, on students, early Black Yale students who got their start in education at historically Black colleges and universities, particularly those that were founded by the American Missionary Association. And so certainly these people would have been viewed as early stars and leaders of this emerging race that is entering out into a free world ready to take on society in all the ways. And certainly these students would have been people who would have been at the forefront of that big active movement. And I chose a really interesting photograph for the opening. This is a scene of both faculty and students, faculty families really, at Atlanta University. And sitting in the middle of that photo is a very important gentleman who was the president of the university, Horace Bumstead, who is a Yale graduate. And also in this photo, you can see in the back row there, Dr. Du Bois, when he first started as a professor at Atlanta University. And on the front row, his daughter Yolande, who is sitting next to Norris Herndon, the son of Alonzo Herndon, the founder of Atlanta Life Insurance Company. But I think this picture really typifies the relationship between many of the teachers and supporters from the Northeast who, as a part of their Christian duty, went south to help educate the newly freed Black people of the South. And this photo really underscores that very layered but interesting relationship. Just to share with you all, just to iterate to you all what Michael said, the Shining Light on Truth exhibit is on view at Schwartzman Center until March 8th. And so we would love to see you in person. You can also join us and see so much of this information or research online at the Shining Light on Truth website. So the American Missionary Association was really an outcrop of a number of Christian-based mission organizations. And people kind of think that this work was solely rooted in working to end slavery, but that's not the case. It was sort of a general welfare, doing your Christian duty across the globe. And so many of the groups that were working together had outposts in Hawaii and in Egypt. And then there was actually some work being done even in Canada with Black people who had liberated themselves from slavery and escaped to Canada. But there was a group of people who were really interested in establishing the eradication of slavery as a rule and of the work that the sort of combined mission groups were doing, and they couldn't agree. And so a certain group pulled out of that and decided that they wanted to focus on the abolishment of slavery, and those folks joined to form the American Missionary Association. Not only was the issue of slavery sort of one of the things that really carved aside this group of AMA founders, it was also some historical incidents that sort of predate the founding of the organization, but certainly were in the backdrop. What you see before you is a seal for the 1831 College for Colored Youth, and this was designed by our exhibit designer, David John Walker. And this sort of represents the historical event in which abolitionists worked with free Blacks to establish what would have been America's first historically Black college. And this commonly called was the College for Colored Youth, and the idea was that it would marry liberal arts also with the mechanical arts and horticultural knowledge, and it would be based here in New Haven. And there's a whole body of work. There's a wonderful documentary called What Could Have Been that you can find for free on YouTube, and you all should watch it to really fill yourselves in with the information around this incident. But the abolitionists who were involved with taking up this cause and really trying to make it happen, and also finance the operation, were some of the folks who would have been inspired by the failure of this enterprise to establish a black college in New Haven. And so while they might have failed in that area, they still worked towards their mission of eradicating slavery and helping to give black Americans a real full chance at citizenship. Another precursor to the American Missionary Association is a famous Amistad incident in which 53 Africans were taken illegally from Africa. They were moved to Cuba, and then from Cuba, they attempted to liberate themselves from enslavement. And you can see here in the scene, it's a popular illustration, The Death of Captain Farrer, where the Africans mutinied and then demanded the remaining personnel of the ship to take them back towards Africa. And so in a tricky move, those people who were captaining the boat sort of turned back, then they would turn back east and then turn back west. And so it created a zigzag all the way up the East Coast. And they were spotted sort of just floating in the waters of the Long Island Sound. And eventually they were towed in to the New Haven area. The captives were jailed here in New Haven, and the boat itself, the schooner Amistad, was taken to New London. There were any number of efforts to find out the real story and origin of these folks and then support them when it was discovered that they were illegally captured and enslaved. And so American citizens, abolitionists, and free black citizens worked to free them. And eventually this issue went all the way to the Supreme Court and was argued by former President John Quincy Adams. Most of that defense work was taken up by people who were involved in the 1831 college incident, and they had failed there, and they were undaunted this time, and they won, freeing the captives. But as a part of that, they also wanted then to take them home. And so a group of missionaries took the African captives who wanted to go back home, back to what is now Sierra Leone. And they decided after doing that that there was work to be done on the continent, but also work to be done back in America around this issue of slavery. And so the Presbyterians and the Congregationalists involved in that effort got together and formalized the start of the American Missionary Association. So it's operating for about 20 years before a real special opportunity to hop into action presents itself. One with the Civil War, and as troops moving throughout the South happened, the enslaved people began to participate in their own liberation, and there had to be something done about housing these folks and feeding these folks, but then really helping them to establish a future for themselves. And that would certainly be through education. And so the American Missionary Association took up the work of educating the millions of freed Black people who were now present at the end of the Civil War. And so out of that, you have not only what would be collegiate level education, but you have schooling of all kinds, primary, normal education, preparing teachers. And so you really get the establishment of what they wanted in 1831 in a larger way in the mid-1860s through the American Missionary Association. And so I wanted to share with you a few folks who would be some of the key cogs in the wheel of making this happen. The Reverend Simeon Jocelyn was an abolitionist, a founder of the oldest or one of the oldest Black congregational independent churches in the country. He also was a prime mover and shaker in the 1831 college establishment effort and a member of the Amistad Committee raising funds for the defense and freedom of the Amistad captives. But his role certainly directly impacts the American Missionary Association, where he serves as the longtime corresponding secretary, making sure that on behalf of the association, they were making contact with friends, supporters, and allies, and the public for sure. And then here, two Other, I would say, co-equal key cogs would be Arthur and Louis Tappan, two wealthy New York City entrepreneurs who put their money where their beliefs were, and they advocated and worked on behalf of freeing the enslaved Black population of America and then setting up institutions to benefit their proliferation, their development, and they were involved in everything from donating money to the Amistad cause, providing the money for purchasing the hotel that was to become the 1831 College in New Haven. They were involved in sort of polling and working with politicians trying to advance the cause. And once the American Missionary Association was established and colleges and universities across the South were open, they donated money to raising buildings in various causes. And so you may find at a number of institutions a Tappan Hall dedicated to Lewis and Arthur Tappan. The American Missionary Associations that were established through the work of these people and others were institutions like Atlanta University, which was established in 1865. You have Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, established in 1866. Howard University, which is considered to be the capstone of historically Black college and university education, really being a model for what the American Missionary Association was hoping to achieve, established in 1867. Hampton Institute for a long time, and now Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, established in 1868, the alma mater of people like Booker T. Washington. You also have in Alabama, Talladega College, which was established in 1867, which sent a number of early Black Yale students, which supplied a number of early Black Yale students. And Dillard University, representing a number of institutions in New Orleans that merged to become Dillard in 1869. And then the last three, and these are all schools that are remaining today. They're in operation today and educating thousands of youth and not just Black college students. Tougaloo College in Mississippi, established in 1869. You have Houston Tillotson, which is located in Austin, Texas, established in 1871. And Lemoyne-Owen College, established in 1871 in Memphis, Tennessee. I want to share with you some of the folks from Yale University who sort of extend this American Missionary Association, HBCU tie. I mentioned him a little earlier in that first picture, and this is Horace Bumstead, and he was a graduate of Yale College in the class of 1863. He was a sort of specialist in military science and entered the Civil War, attaining the rank of major for the 43rd United States Colored Infantry. He also was a congregational minister. And it's interesting that sort of juxtaposition between military service and being a congregational minister. And this probably is where some of that reference to radicals comes from, where you have these people who were so believing in their faith and in their Christian walk that God wanted all people free, regardless of race. And they were willing to fight for that and die for that belief and for that cause. And then he was probably most outstanding to many folks as the president of Atlanta University. You also have Edmund Asa Ware, who was also of the Yale College class of 1863. He took work in the South, working to reorganize the Nashville school system at the close of the Civil War. He eventually was appointed by General Howard, who is the namesake of Howard University. He was appointed by General Howard to be the superintendent of education in the state of Georgia. And a lot of this work that is outside of the military was sort of run by the military, these sort of governmental posts, which would have been how Edmund Ware came to that post. And he was the first president of Atlanta University. But I do want to say that there were two Black men who had been enslaved in Atlanta who founded Atlanta University and then joined up with the work of the American Missionary Association. And Edmund Asa Ware was the first president of that institution. And then you also have family connections and sort of this passed on belief, one of their faith, and then also of just being a witness to the fine work that parents and family members do. And that would have been sort of expressed in a person like Edward Twitchelware, who was a 1897 Yale College graduate and the son of the last person we just saw, Edmund Asa Ware, and he grew up in Atlanta during his dad's work. He came north for schooling and returned to help raise funds for AU, for Atlanta University, and he becomes the third president of Atlanta University. And so, what we should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to have people like this who have education from one of the, if not the top institution of American higher education? What does that mean for the people who are on the receiving end of that education? Well, you have to think. You have people who are literally the children of and people who had walked out of being enslaved themselves, sitting at the desk side of these people who are bringing all of their knowledge of teaching and what that should look like and curriculum from an institution like Yale, and then others that had been a part of their own personal education. And so it's a really awesome and great education for people who literally were barred by law for generations from being able to learn and read. One of the examples of somebody who would have benefited from this kind of interaction and this kind of education would be Dr. George Edmund Haynes. And he was born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. He is a graduate of the American Missionary Association, Nashville located Fisk University. He leaves there in 1903 and immediately makes his way to New Haven and works on a master's degree in economics, which he earns in 1904. He also then continues his education at the University of Chicago, and then while he's working in New York, he earns a doctorate from Columbia University. But he is using this to really enter a brand new field, and we give Dr. Du Bois sort of the face to go along with the discipline of sociology. But Dr. George Edmund Haynes was an early sociologist as well, and he was an active social worker, and he used that sociological imagination to really impact lives in the area of housing and education. Also, putting people to work. And that comes about in his co-founding of the National Urban League, where he served as the first executive director. You also have people like Jasper Alston Atkins, who's also a Fisk graduate, and he is coming from North Carolina. After his time at Fisk, where he was a top student, he makes his way to New Haven, where he enters the Yale Law School. There, he performs in an outstanding way, achieving the never having been achieved prize of becoming the editor of the Yale Law Journal, and he is also a graduate of the law school in 1922. At the same time, this young man is also participating in a huge movement that is sort of sweeping Black college students, and that is organizing themselves around learning and around service and the establishment of fraternities and sororities. And J. Alston Atkins was a founder of Yale's Chi chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, but he also goes on to be their national leader, which they call Grand Basileus. And he is an outstanding, he goes on to an outstanding legal career as well. Here we have the Reverend Dr. Charles H. Wesley, who was born in Louisville and educated at Fisk. Like others before him, he would have known that this was sort of a thing that AMA students, AMA graduates could do by the time he was at Fisk. And so if you were a top student there, certainly your professors, your administrators would have said, you should continue your education, at some of the bigger schools in America, and using their own personal contacts, using the American Missionary Association contacts, expressly pipelining students from AMA schools to schools like Yale. And so Charles Wesley comes to Yale and he earns a master's degree in history. He also then goes on to earn a doctorate from Harvard in 1925, and he's in that rare group of Harvard-trained Black historians, like Du Bois, like Carter G. Woodson, as we talk about Black History Month. And then we have him going on to a career in higher education as a professor. He's also a minister in the AME Church. He was twice a college president and of two different historically Black colleges and universities that were tied to the AME Church, and that's Wilberforce University and Central State University, both in Ohio. And he was a prolific historian and writer. And one of his sort of greatest claims to fame is his time serving as the national president, which is called the general president of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And he was involved in a number of Black men's service and social organizations. And interestingly enough, he is the person who authored the histories of a number of those organizations, the Black Elks, the Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and Alpha Phi Alpha's history book as well. And so he is a much revered historian and cultural sort of keeper. Here we have an outstanding young student, William Pickens, who was born in South Carolina. He was partially raised in Arkansas. He goes to Talladega College in Alabama, top student there. Obviously, because of his performance at Talladega, like the others, he is recommended for greater educational opportunity, and he finds his way to Yale. And many of these students would have had interaction, maybe going on speaking tours or fundraising opportunities in the North. And they would have come across wealthy benefactors and supporters who really believed in what the AMA was doing, one, in establishing the schools, but then really believed in the progress of said project by people like William Pickens, who they encountered, who were just, myth-defying in their presentation. As you know, some of the trope was sort of like ignorance and the inability to learn, especially a college education, and then one of an Ivy League nature would have certainly been, not believed. And William Pickens was a walking, talking, myth-defying force. He went on to serve. Interestingly enough, he was offered an opportunity basically to go on the grand speaking tour. And he did do speeches of all kinds all over the world, but he expressly shared that he wanted to go back south and help his people. And so after graduating from Yale, Phi Beta Kappa in 1904, he goes to Wiley College in Texas, where he teaches Latin, and he then fills out college administrative positions as dean there and at Morgan State University in Baltimore. And he has a stellar career as a national civil rights advocate and activist, where he is a top figure at the NAACP and a thought leader and a political wheeling dealer for the rest of his life. Here's a person who's special in that he was born enslaved. This is the Reverend Dr. Thomas Nelson Baker, commonly known as T. Nelson Baker, and he was a minister. But he was born enslaved in Virginia, and because of that, he started his education late. He also had to help his parents on the farm, and so his initial schooling was spotty at best. And by the time he really takes on sort of consistent education, he's older than most of the students around him. He eventually is recommended to Hampton Institute, the then Hampton Institute, and at that time it was presided over by General Samuel Chapman Armstrong, who was a former Civil War general, but a mentor, also most noted to Booker T. Washington. And he took T. Nelson Baker under his wing as well. And then from Hampton, recommended that T. Nelson Baker go on to other education in the North, Mount Herman School in Massachusetts, then on to Boston University, where he becomes the valedictorian of his class in 1893. Wants to pursue the ministry, so he goes to Yale, earns a bachelor's in sacred theology from the Divinity School, and begins work on a PhD in philosophy, which he earns in 1903, becoming the first Black American to earn the PhD in philosophy in the United States. And so he's certainly a person who I go back to and who on our project we go back to because this person is someone who literally lived in the shadow of slavery and then made a true mark of resilience and excellence and his belief in God and what he did with his life. It's also important to note that his PhD started a trend of earning PhDs in his family, his son and his grandsons holding PhDs that they earned as well. Quite a legacy. George Crawford, who we've talked about before, but we can't leave him out of this conversation when we're talking about American Missionary Association schools. He's born in Alabama, raised by former enslaved relatives. He attends Tuskegee Institute, where he is mentored by Booker T. Washington, then goes for collegiate education, which Tuskegee did not offer at that time. He goes to Talladega for his bachelor's degree, again through the American Missionary Association, and his fine work. He is pipeline, if you will, to Yale, where he wants to attend law school, and he graduates in the class of 1903 as a prize winner alongside William Pickens, who we just saw, who won top prizes in Yale College for oratory. And so both men were sort of a joint example at the time of the power of Black intellect and the abilities of Black people to handle college education, but to master college education at Ivy League schools like Yale. He was a close ally of W.E.B. Du Bois. He was a founding member of the Niagara movement. He then goes on with that organization as things change to the NAACP. He's a National Board of Directors member for many, many years for the NAACP. He's a personal friend and legal advisor to Dr. Du Bois and other great men. He was Marian Anderson's personal attorney and the first Black corporation counsel for the city of New Haven. But I noted here he is the one sort of sure Black figure who sticks with the American Missionary Association, not as a recipient of their charity, but as a leader in helping to craft the direction of the organization and make sure that they continue on their mission and impact educating Black Americans. And so he was a board member of the AMA and then used that connection to do a lot for various colleges and universities and art and culture in Black America. And here I want to share, I wish in this presentation that there were more women in sort of this category of those AMA recipients. And I must say, in history there are, but in the time period that Shining Light on Truth covered, which was the 1830s to 1940s, there weren't many that fit into this AMA graduate pool. But one person who did certainly was Charlotte Crawford Watkins, who is the daughter of George Crawford, who we just saw, born in New Haven. And she certainly would have been inspired by her dad and his friends who were coming through New Haven to be educated at Yale. She was literally at the knee of people who were plotting and planning the direction of Black America for many years to come. She was a graduate of Hill House High School and went on to Wellesley College herself, and then came back home. And of course, she would have, one, known it was possible, two, likely because of the personality of her father, pushed to pursue advanced study at Yale, which she did, earning her PhD in English in 1937. She went on to a distinguished career as a college professor at various historically Black colleges and universities, some of which were American Missionary Associated schools, including Dillard in New Orleans, and a long career at Howard University, where her husband was also a professor, Mark Hanna Watkins. And so that AMA tie for her comes through, I would say, education from her whole community, and then and where she chose to do her life's work. Two brothers who we can't leave out of this conversation are George Williamson Ish and his brother Jefferson Ish, both graduates of Talladega College in Alabama, both from Little Rock. They are the children of formerly enslaved parents who were able to receive college education themselves. And because of their experience and the way college really impacted their lives, it was clear that their children were going to avail themselves of that same opportunity, and they did. So after Talladega, they both attended Yale first, George Ish, graduating in 1905 from Yale College, and then going to Harvard for medical school, and then Jefferson Ish, following his big brother to Yale College, leaving in 1909. And then after entering Yale Medical School for a year, deciding he didn't want to do that, he goes into higher education. He's the president of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff for a number of years where he was highly successful, but then he wants to enter a burgeoning sort of industry for Black people, which was insurance. And he goes on to be an officer of Chicago Supreme Life Insurance Company, and he dies in the early 1960s as one of America's richest Black men. And so all of these folks that I'm sharing with you in this conversation, you all can learn about online and the online exhibit that you can find here. And I have the website there for you. Shining Light on Truth houses the biographies of close to 300 early Black Yale students from the 1830s to till about 1940. You have men and women in that group. Not only are there biographies for them, the research team here also spent a lot of time gathering as many images of these people as we could find. And it was no small task, but we were successful, and we are still looking for images. And so if anybody who is on the other side listening to this has information that they think would make sense to share, or you have some images of some folks that fit into this category, please feel free to reach out to us here at the Beinecke Library. And if you have stories to share, or you are descendants yourself of AMA education and or these folks and this Shining Light on Truth collection, please reach out and share what you know. The Beinecke is committed to sharing these stories, not just during Black History Month, but all throughout the year and ongoing work that we're doing here at the Beinecke Library. And we are fortunate to be able to have that opportunity to do that, and a group of people who are committed themselves to making sure these stories and the other stories get told.